My name is Daniel Harper. I've been the sheriff of Black Ridge County for 17 years. If you visit Black Ridge during the day, you won't notice anything strange. Wide farmland, long empty roads, a few scattered houses, and a quiet town center. But there is 1 hour every night that none of us take lightly. Between 2 and 3 a.m., we don't talk about it publicly. We don't warn newcomers directly. But every deputy knows that hour is different. We unofficially call it the dead hour. Everything started 15 years ago. The first call came in at 2:11 a.m. A farmer called dispatch, his voice shaking. "Sheriff, someone is standing outside my barn. They're not moving. They're just watching my house." We sent a deputy immediately. When he arrived, the property was empty, doors locked, no sign of anyone. But in the grass near the barn were bare footprints. They stopped suddenly, as if whoever made them simply vanished. The next night, at 2:27 a.m., another call, this time a woman. "My husband went outside," she whispered. "He hasn't come back. I can see him through the window, but he's just standing there." When deputies arrived, the husband was indeed outside, standing perfectly still, eyes open, face blank, alive, but not really present. He died before sunrise. The doctors said it was a heart attack, but during the autopsy they found something that made no sense. His lungs were filled with dirt and ash, not water, not blood, earth. That's when we realized this wasn't coincidence. Over the years, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every incident happened between 2 and 3 a.m., mostly rural properties. People either disappeared completely or returned, changed. We tried warning people once. The next 3 callers became victims within a week. After that, we stopped. One of my deputies, Mark Allen, laughed it off. "Sheriff, this is just panic and coincidence," he said. The very next night at 2:43 a.m., his radio activated on its own. All it transmitted was one sentence: "They're watching us." We found Mark's patrol car parked on the roadside, door open, radio still on. His voice continued transmitting for nearly 10 minutes. But Mark was gone. He has never been found. That's when we created rules we never wrote down. Between 2 and 3 a.m., no deputy responds alone, no one approaches farmhouses. If a voice sounds familiar, you do not answer. Because the problem isn't that something is out there, the problem is that whatever it is, it knows us. I learned that personally. One night at 2:18 a.m., while I was alone in my office, I heard a soft knock on the window. I looked out. Someone stood there wearing my face, smiling. I stepped back, turned off the lights, closed my eyes. When I looked again, it was gone. But on the glass, from the inside, was a handprint. That was the night I accepted the truth. In Black Ridge County, between 2 and 3 a.m., we don't enforce the law, we survive. And if you ever find yourself driving through this county during that hour, and you hear someone call your name from the darkness, do not stop, do not answer. Because in Black Ridge, those voices aren't asking for help. They're looking for someone to replace the hour that doesn't behave like time. After Mark Allen vanished, none of us could pretend anymore. Black Ridge County didn't have a problem. It had a schedule. Between 2 and 3 a.m., the county behaved differently. Not violently, not loudly, wrongly. Time itself felt unstable during that hour. Deputies started reporting small things at first, clocks stopping at 2:17 and restarting at 3:01, radio transmissions arriving before they were sent, 911 calls logged with timestamps that didn't exist. One deputy swore he finished an entire patrol route in 10 minutes, a route that normally took over an hour. Another claimed he sat in his car, engine off, for what felt like seconds, only to look up and see dawn breaking. We checked GPS data. Both were right. Time didn't disappear, it folded. That was when we realized the dead hour wasn't just when incidents happened. It was when rules loosened, not our rules, realities. The next confirmed incident happened on a closed stretch of Route 19 at 2:34 a.m. A truck driver called in, barely able to speak. "There's a man standing in the road," he said. "He looks like me." The call dropped. We arrived 10 minutes later. The truck was there. Hazard lights flashing, door open, no driver. Inside the cab, we found mud on the seat and steering wheel. The same fine dirt and ash we'd seen in previous autopsies. No footprints led away. Only 2 sets led toward the truck, identical. That case never made the news. None of them did. Because once we noticed the pattern, we noticed something worse. The dead hour wasn't random. It was selective. It targeted people who were alone, stationary, paying attention to the dark. The more still someone was, the more likely something would notice them. That's why the calls always came late, why the figures never chased. They didn't need to. They waited for people to stop. We changed procedures quietly. Between 2 and 3 a.m., no sitting still longer than 5 minutes. Engines kept running. Radios left on constant chatter. No staring into darkness. Noise became a survival tool. Silence was dangerous. One night I tested it myself. At 2:12 a.m., I sat alone in my office and turned everything off. Lights, radio, phone. I waited. At first nothing happened. Then the pressure started. Not in my ears. In my chest. Like the room was breathing inward. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, bare, stopping every time I shifted in my chair. I didn't look. I stood up and turned the lights back on. The footsteps vanished instantly. When I checked the hallway later, there was no sign anyone had been there, except for one thing. A thin layer of dust, disturbed by bare feet, leading nowhere. After that night, I understood the truth we'd been circling. Whatever exists in Black Ridge County doesn't hunt. It waits for permission, and permission comes when someone gives it attention long enough. That's why the dead hour is so dangerous. Not because of what appears, but because of what happens to people when the world goes quiet. We still don't know where the missing go, but we know one thing. Those who vanish during the dead hour are never reported as deceased. They're listed as unresolved, because something about them remains present, watching, waiting for the next 2 a.m. The ones who came back were worse. Not everyone taken during the dead hour stayed gone. That was the part we didn't talk about, because the ones who came back were harder to explain than the disappearances. The first return happened 3 years after the pattern became clear. A woman named Ellen Price, mid-40s, lived alone near the county line. She vanished at 2:22 a.m. after calling 911 and saying only one sentence, "He's standing where I should be." Search teams found nothing, no tracks, no signs of struggle. She was officially listed as missing. 17 days later at 2:58 a.m., she walked into the emergency room, barefoot, covered in dirt, completely calm. She knew her name, knew where she lived, passed every basic cognitive test. But something was off. She never blinked unless reminded, and when doctors asked where she'd been, she said, "Waiting." Waiting where? She couldn't answer that. She was released after 2 days. Within a week we noticed the changes. Ellen stopped locking her doors, stopped using lights at night. Neighbors said she would stand in her yard between 2 and 3 a.m., perfectly still, just listening. When I interviewed her, she smiled politely and asked, "Sheriff, do you hear it too?" I asked what she meant. She tilted her head slightly. The space between sounds, she said, "It's fuller at night." 3 nights later, Ellen was gone again. This time, she didn't call. Her house was immaculate, too immaculate. Every surface wiped clean, no dust, no fingerprints, just one thing left behind. Her shoes, placed neatly by the door. After Ellen, there were others. A teenage boy found wandering Route 7 at 2:41 a.m., unable to explain why he'd left home. A truck driver discovered sitting in his cab at sunrise, engine cold, eyes open, silent. They all shared the same traits: no fear, no urgency, a constant urge to be alone at night. They weren't traumatized, they were adjusted, like something had rewritten their sense of danger. The medical examiner noticed something else. Every returned person showed abnormal readings in brain scans, not damage, repatterning. Neural pathways altered in ways that didn't match any known condition, as if their brains had been trained to process silence differently. That's when a terrifying idea took hold. The dead hour wasn't just taking people, it was testing them. Some weren't suitable. They disappeared completely. Others were sent back, changed, learning tools. We started tracking returnees. Every single one vanished again within 6 months, always between 2 and 3 a.m., always without resistance. One deputy asked me the question we were all thinking, "Sheriff, what if they aren't coming back wrong? What if they're coming back prepared?" I didn't answer him, because I had already noticed something worse. The returned never stopped looking toward the same time. Even during the day, clocks, watches, phone screens, like part of them was still waiting for that hour to come back. And once it did, they followed it. That's when I realized something chilling. The dead hour isn't a window, it's an invitation. And some people accept it more easily than others. The place that doesn't appear on maps. After the third returnee vanished for the second time, we stopped pretending the pattern could be managed. It was spreading, and it had a center. Every disappearance, every return, every 911 call between 2 and 3 a.m. traced back. Loosely at first, toward the same stretch of land in the northern part of Black Ridge County, a place locals called Old Hollow Road. It didn't show up on modern GPS systems. County maps listed it as decommissioned, no maintenance records, no property taxes, no registered residents, and yet calls came from there, always during the dead hour. The first time we drove out there as a team, it was daylight. Old Hollow Road looked wrong. The pavement was intact, but no tire marks ever stayed. Trees leaned inward as if listening. Sound behaved strangely. Voices didn't carry, but footsteps echoed too loudly. At the far end of the road was a clearing, and in that clearing stood 3 houses, all abandoned, all intact. No vandalism, no decay, like time avoided them. We found something worse inside. On the walls of each house were scratches, not random, organized, tall marks, short marks, grouped, like records. In the largest house, the basement was filled with dirt. Not soil from the area, but fine ash mixed with earth. The same substance found in victims' lungs. Carved into one beam was a date, 1931. That was the year Black Ridge County was officially founded. We sealed the area, put up barriers. Officially, it was for environmental contamination. Unofficially, it was because the place felt awake. 2 weeks later, at 2:16 a.m., we got a call from inside the sealed zone. A young man's voice. "I found the houses," he said calmly. "They've been waiting." We traced the call. The phone was found in the clearing, still warm, no caller. After that, Old Hollow Road began disappearing, literally. Satellite images showed trees where pavement should be. Maps updated themselves. Eventually, even our internal records began losing detail, like the county was correcting us, erasing what it didn't want acknowledged. That's when one of the older deputies, Nally, told us the story. Black Ridge wasn't settled, it was contained. The land had always done this, long before the county, long before the town. Early settlers noticed people disappearing during a specific hour of the night. Instead of leaving, they built around it, structured it, named it. The town wasn't T-cursed, it was a lid, and Old Hollow Road was the hinge. That's why the dead hour exists. That's why the town demands attention, silence, routine. Because order keeps it quiet. We didn't close Old Hollow Road to protect the public. We closed it because it was waking up. And whatever waits there doesn't want everyone, just enough. When the dead hour started to stretch. For decades, the dead hour stayed where it belonged, between 2 and 3 a.m. Predictable, contained, manageable. That's how we survived it. Until it started arriving early. The first sign was subtle. A dispatcher logged a call at 1:54 a.m. and flagged it by mistake, thinking it was a typo. The caller said nothing, just breathing, slow, patient. The line stayed open for exactly 6 minutes, then disconnected at 2 a.m. on the dot. We told ourselves it didn't count. The next night, another call, 1:49 a.m. A woman whispering, "Is it time yet?" No address, no name, just that question, then silence. By the end of the month, the earliest call came at 1:31 a.m. That's when panic quietly entered the department. The dead hour wasn't a fixed window anymore. It was expanding. Deputies started reporting the same pressure earlier in the night, that heaviness in the chest, that feeling of being observed from just outside perception. It no longer waited until 2. It was testing how much earlier it could reach. We adjusted protocols. Night shifts started sooner. Radios stayed active longer. No one worked alone after midnight. But the thing about the dead hour is that it doesn't care about preparation. It cares about attention. One night, I reviewed old recordings from Old Hollow Road. The audio didn't change with the timestamps. The same low background tone existed before, during, and after the dead hour. The difference wasn't the sound. It was when people noticed it. That's when the truth finally surfaced. The dead hour isn't a time, it's a state. A condition that happens when the world grows quiet enough. 2 to 3 a.m. was just the easiest window. But now Black Ridge was quieter. Fewer people, less traffic, more empty houses. The town was giving it more room. That's why it was stretching. That's why it needed fewer boundaries. The next incident confirmed our worst fear. At 1:38 a.m., a deputy named Caleb Morris called in. His voice was steady, too steady. "Sheriff," he said, "I'm parked near Old Hollow Road. I know it's closed, but I think it wants me to see something." I ordered him to leave immediately. He didn't argue. He just said, "It's already showing me." His GPS signal froze, then began moving in small circles. Not driving, walking, back and forth. At 1:59 a.m., his radio transmitted one final sentence: "It's not hungry anymore." When we reached the location at daylight, Caleb's cruiser was there, engine cold, door open, no sign of him, but the ground around the car was disturbed, not by struggle, by standing. Bare footprints everywhere, facing inward, as if the land itself had been watching him. After that night, the dead hour officially began at 1:30 a.m. Not because we declared it, because the calls said so, and each night it crept a little earlier, like something learning it didn't need to wait. That's when I realized the most terrifying possibility of all. Black Ridge County isn't losing control. It's becoming unnecessary. The town was built to contain what lived beneath it. UT containment requires boundaries, and boundaries only work when people are present to maintain them. As people leave, as silence grows, the dead hour doesn't need the town anymore. It's learning how to exist on its own, why it started taking deputies. For most of its history, the dead hour took civilians, farmers, truck drivers, people passing through. That changed when it started getting smarter. The first time it targeted one of us on purpose, we didn't recognize it for what it was. We thought it was coincidence. Deputy Caleb Morris was only the beginning. After him, the disappearances shifted. Less random, more precise. It stopped taking people who didn't understand what was happening. It started taking the ones who did. Deputies who knew the rules, dispatchers who tracked the calls, people who recognized the pattern. People who could be useful. That's when I realized something horrifying. The thing beneath Black Ridge wasn't just feeding anymore. It was recruiting. One of our longest-serving deputies, Frank Dalton, finally admitted what he'd been seeing. "I don't think they're gone," he told me one night. "I think they're still here." He said that during the dead hour, he sometimes saw figures standing at the edge of patrol routes. Not threatening, not moving, watching. Some wore uniforms, old ones, styles we hadn't used in decades, badges with numbers that didn't exist anymore. Frank showed me something worse: old personnel records, deputies who had vanished over the last 50 years. When we compared their photos to descriptions from night patrols, the similarities were undeniable. Same height, same posture, same stillness. They weren't ghosts, they were placeholders, maintaining the boundary, doing the job we thought we were doing. That's why the dead hour respected the rules, because the rules were taught to it, by us, or rather, by those who stayed. I confronted the oldest living former sheriff, Walter Briggs, who retired before I joined. He didn't deny it. "We were never meant to stop it," he said. "We were meant to replace it." He told me the final truth. When Black Ridge was founded, the original caretakers made a deal. The land would be structured. The town would exist. Order would be maintained. In exchange, the thing beneath would remain dormant. But dormancy required watchers, people who understood the dead hour, people who could operate within it. Over time, the watchers became part of the system, not alive, not dead, something in between. Frank disappeared 3 nights after that conversation. No call, no radio transmission, just gone. At his last known location, we found something new. No footprints, no disturbance, just a faint circular pattern in the dirt, like something had closed. After Frank vanished, the dead hour pulled back slightly. Calls returned, closer to 2 a.m. The pressure eased. That's when I understood the sick logic of it all. When it takes one of us, it stabilizes. It doesn't want chaos, it wants balance. And now, aft. Years of resisting, I could feel its attention shifting toward me. Not hunger, evaluation. I started seeing reflections linger too long. Hearing my name spoken when no one was there. At 1:58 a.m., my radio once whispered, "You know how this works? And the worst part?" It was right. I did. I knew exactly what would happen when it decided I was needed, which meant there was only one thing left to do. Because once the dead hour chooses you, you don't disappear, you stay. The choice no sheriff escapes. I always believed I'd recognize the moment it chose me. I expected fear or panic or some dramatic sign. Instead, it felt like acceptance. The night it happened, there were no calls, no whispers on the radio, no pressure in my chest, just silence. And silence in Black Ridge County is never empty. At 1:57 a.m., I was alone in the station, finishing paperwork I didn't need to finish. I knew I was stalling. At 2 a.m., every clock in the building stopped. Not malfunctioned. Stopped. The air grew thick, like the building itself was holding its breath. Then my radio turned on by itself. No static, no interference. Just my own voice. Calm. Clear. "Sheriff, you understand now." I didn't respond. I already knew better. The voice continued, not from the radio this time, but from everywhere at once. "You've maintained order. You've protected the boundary. You've learned when to look away." That's when it finally made the offer, not in words, in understanding. I saw it then. Not as a creature, not as a presence, but as a system. Black Ridge County wasn't built on top of something evil. It was built around something unfinished, a place where reality thinned, where time didn't fully attach itself. The dead hour wasn't an attack, it was maintenance. And maintenance requires caretakers. That's what the vanished. Deputies became. That's what Fra. NK became. That's what Mark became. Not victims. Components. "You don't need me," I said quietly. "There are others." The silence pressed closer. There must always be one who remembers. That was the rule beneath all the others. Not written, not spoken. Felt. At 2:06 a.m., the front door unlocked. The town outside looked exactly the same, but I could feel it watching, waiting to see if I would leave. I thought about escape, about driving until sunrise, about forgetting this place existed. And for a moment, the pressure eased, as if it were curious. Then I understood the final truth. Leaving doesn't break the system, it weakens it, and when it weakens, it compensates. With chaos, with more disappearances, with more people taken who never had a choice. Staying wasn't sacrifice, it was containment. So I did what every sheriff before me eventually did. I stayed. At 2:14 a.m. the clock started again. At 3:01 a.m. the dead hour released its hold. The radio went quiet. The town exhaled. In the morning everything was normal, too normal. No missing persons, no reports, no disturbances. Black Ridge was stable again. They'll replace me someday. I can feel the evaluation starting already. A deputy who asks too many questions. A dispatcher who notices patterns. That's how it begins. Until then, I do my job. I enforce the law during the day, and at night, I make sure the rules are followed, because now I understand what happens to the ones who don't disappear. They stay behind the silence, watching the clock, waiting for the next 2 a.m. And if you ever pass through Black Ridge County and notice how quiet it feels at night, keep driving, don't stop, don't listen. Because the town doesn't need everyone, it just needs someone to remember. And one day, that someone will not be me. End.